Hello everyone, I'm Red Team Beaver and welcome back to day 20 of the Advent of Cyber 3 by TryHackMe. Today's challenge is something that everybody should be a little bit interested into because it's all about malware analysis. Well, not really malware analysis, we're not going to do anything crazy today, but we're going to do the first steps into examining a file that we don't know the origin of, or maybe that we don't know the format of, etc. And we're also going to be using VirusTotal, which is a tool that everybody should get to know, even if you are not familiar with cybersecurity, simply because VirusTotal will basically run a bunch of AV scans on your file and basically tell you if it's dangerous or not. So if you download stuff from the internet, which I think we all do, you should get used to basically pull up everything into that VirusTotal website. So let's get into it. So what we'll do today is basically use file to determine a given file type, basically. So Linux, as you may know, doesn't care about your file extension. For example, I could do echo this is a picture and then put it into pic.png. However, even though this is a pic.png, if I were to file pic.png, it would still tell me that it is ASCII text, right? So this isn't a real PNG just because I say it's a PNG. And the same thing could go around and say that this is a text file and then put it into text.txt, for example. And if I were to run file against it, well, you'll see that it's still ASCII text. Why is this useful? Well, this could be useful, for example, in this case, right? So you get a file that has no extension. You can still run file against it and attempt to see what is going on. So in my case, one example of when I had to use this tool, like this file utility, was during a CTF, we had a file with no extension and we had to figure out what it was so we could analyze it, right? Because it was just a bunch of data. But using this file command, I managed to figure out what kind of data I was looking at, and I could use the appropriate tool to extract the information from it and have it in a readable format. Strings is different, but also used for similar stuff, in my opinion. Basically, you can run strings against any kind of file, and it's going to only output the human readable strings, right? So any data that is not human readable won't be outputted with the strings command. So let's keep scrolling down and finally get to VirusTotal. VirusTotal is probably my favorite website so far. You can basically upload any file, and what it's going to do, I'll actually upload my tests, like my test file, and basically doing so will scan the file with a bunch of different antivirus. So you see that I have 57 AV that scanned it, and then depending on what the kind of file, you can look at what they're doing. So what URL do they contact, what IP address do they contact, and doing so will basically help you see if your file is malicious or not. Well, see, it's not a foolproof process, but it's still a good start, right? Still use common sense. So we can also use MD5sum to basically get the output of a file in MD5, and then we can also use this to search, to basically go back on VirusTotal and research it instead, right? We could just input this file hash here. All right. So with this in mind, oh, by the way, if you have malware, this is how it's going to look like. So with this in mind, let's go right into the practical part of this room and look at what is going on. So here we need to basically make sure that the machine is launched, and then we can scroll all the way up and then do the split view. Just like yesterday, I will actually use the view in full screen mode, which will open a new tab for me, and I will turn off this split view mode. All right, let's scroll all the way back down to our questions. So on our little browser based, we have some test files and we have some samples and everything like that. So what do we need to do? Well, we see that there's a test file on the desktop, and using the strings command, we can check the strings in the file. Of course, that's what we said. So let's do two things first. So let's first try to head it, right? So let's try to add test file. Well, let's actually give it more than that. -n. Is there anything else? There's nothing else. Can I get? Okay, so I didn't check before, but basically this test file is only a one string. But if there was data that were not human readable, you know, we would see it with add or with cat. However, running the strings will actually be the same result as we saw before. So let's grab this old string, copy it, and then paste it right here. Now we can check the file type of test file using the file command. So just like we did before. We can go back here and then do file and test file. Now we see that this is ACAR virus test files. Okay, that's interesting to us. And we'll learn more about that later on. So calculate the file's hash and search for it on VirusTotal, what I was mentioning before. So let's do MD5 sum. Can I zoom this? Yes. Let's do MD5 sum and with test file. Now we see this is our hash, and we can actually input it on VirusTotal with our file hash. And we'll see that, just like we probably guessed, this is a malicious file. However, as you see, it's nothing bad will happen to it if you run it on your computer. This is just a test file, and we'll actually learn more about this test file later on. So we see that there's a bunch of detections. So what is the question? When was the file first seen in the wild? All right, so let's look at details. And we see that it was first seen in the wild in 2005. So I went to the details tab and just scroll down a little bit. Great. So on VirusTotal's detection tab, what is the classification assigned to the file by Microsoft? So let's look at Microsoft. So let's go back to detection and let's look for Microsoft. And we see that this is a virus DOS ACAR tests file. Good. So now we can go look at the history of the file, and we need to find the two first names for this file. So I won't read all of this with you guys. I invite you to read it yourself. But basically what I read it myself before I recorded. But basically what this file does is it will pretend to be malware for antivirus research fields tests, basically. The authors of this paper do mention being researchers, and that, you know, having random people ask you for virus samples is sketch. And you can actually see it here. So where is it actually? Hold up. Yes, see right here. So basically this ACAR file was made for people who are looking for real viruses, quote unquote, for test purposes, right? So this is what this is all about. And the first names it had was ducklin htm or ducklin-html.htm, which we see right at the beginning of the file. Of the paper, sorry. So the file has 68 known characters in the start, known as the known string, which is what we were doing before, right here, right? This one. So, for example, if we were to do strings into ~c, well, it's actually 69. I'm not sure why it has a character. I'm curious about it, but nonetheless. So we see that this is 68 characters in the start, known as the known file. It can be appended with white space characters up to a limit number of characters. What is the maximum number of total characters that can be in the file? So if we were to go ahead and look around, we would actually see that if you read it, that there is 128 that can be there. If I were to just Ctrl F it, 128, yeah. So the first 68 characters is a known string. It may be optionally appended by any combination of white space characters with a total file length not exceeding 128 characters. So just like that, guys, we have completed day 20 of the Advent of Cyber 3 by TryHackMe, and I hope you learned something, and I hope that you will start using VirusTotal for all of your file needs, basically. Thank you guys so much for watching day 20 of the Advent of Cyber 3 by TryHackMe. If you liked the video, please consider subscribing and liking it. It always helps me a lot, and if you want to support me, the links are in the description below. I will see you tomorrow for day 21, and yeah, we're reaching the end, so let's keep at it. Have a good day. See you tomorrow.